So the NHL season is almost upon us, which means it's time for us to preview the upcoming season for the Toronto Maple Leafs as a very different looking roster gets set to take the ice for a season that is surely to be filled with new challenges and obstacles as the team embarks on a new journey, a new era, if you will. And we've got a lot to talk about. So welcome into Game Over Toronto. My name is Zach Payne, and today we are going to be breaking down everything that you need to know about this Leafs team as we get set for the 2025-26 season. But before we do, if we could get you to hit that like button, subscribe with notifications turned on. It's a small channel. It really does help us grow over here at the Game Over Network. And if you're new here, then welcome in at Game Over Toronto. We do post-game shows after every single Toronto Maple Leafs game. So as the season is fast approaching, make sure you're subscribed with notifications turned on so you don't miss any of those broadcasts. Now, in order to break down what lies ahead for the Toronto Maple Leafs, we first have to look back at how things went last season. Last season was head coach Craig Berube's first year with the team, and with that, he brought in a new system for the Leafs to play that was a lot more low event. Defensively, they focused on taking away the high danger areas of the ice, and offensively, they banked on their high-end talent, converting on chances at a higher percentage clip than their opponents, which would lead to a lot of low-scoring close wins. And it's hard to argue that that style didn't find at least some success, and it was a ton of success in the regular season as the Maple Leafs finished 52-26-4 with 108 points. That was good for first in the Atlantic Division, the first time the Maple Leafs have won the Atlantic Division, and obviously their first division title since the Canadian Division, but that doesn't really count. It was the first time that they've won their division in a real year in a long time. And obviously, in the playoffs, the Maple Leafs defeated the Ottawa Senators in 6 games to move on to the second round. And in the second round, something crazy happened. The Leafs lost in 7 games. I hadn't seen that one before. That's a new one. Regardless of how poorly the season ended, it is worth acknowledging that that is the furthest that the Leafs got in this era, which is so depressing to think about. And now that era has been flushed down the toilet. The Core 4 era is dead, and we are in a new era of Leafs hockey where hopefully more success will be found, but based on recent history, it's kind of hard to believe that. Sorry, this is not meant to be doom and gloom. Anyways, the Maple Leafs, part of the problem that they ran into last season is for as good as they were at winning these close games, they weren't generating a ton of chances, obviously, in a low event style, but they also weren't controlling possession very well either. The Maple Leafs finished 29th in the league in Corsi for percentage, and for those of you who don't know, Corsi is just shot attempts. So the team that has more shot attempts throughout the game will generally have the puck more. So if you have a high Corsi percentage, that means you generally have the puck more, which is what you want because you want to have possession, you want to drive play. The Leafs were very bad at that. The Leafs had just a 47.37 shot attempt share last season, and while that doesn't sound like egregiously poor, you have to remember, this is over an 82 game sample size. So there are games in there that the Leafs were down in the dumps, and there were games obviously against bad opponents where they control play a little bit more, but every single game it seemed like there was a period where the Leafs had to weather the storm and they didn't get a shot attempt for at least half a period. Case in point, Game 7 against Florida, the Panthers had like 20 shot attempts before the Leafs had 1. The Leafs really had a problem with controlling possession last year, and that is something that they are going to have to improve on. And as a result, their expected goals numbers also weren't great either. While this was a little bit better because the Leafs did a good job of generating high danger chances and did a good job of limiting those types of chances, the Leafs finished with a 49.82 expected goals percentage, which was dead middle of the pack at 16th. But where things get interesting is the actual goals that were scored, you know, what the whole point is. The Leafs actually had 55.4% of the goals scored in their games, which was good for 4th in the league. So while the Leafs did not control possession at all, they very rarely had the puck. When they did have the puck, they did a good job of converting their chances, and they did a good job of not allowing a ton at their own end. Part of that is because the Leafs boasted arguably the best goaltending duo in the entire league last year. Anthony Stolarz was 4th in the league with 25.8 goals saved above expected. Joseph Woll was not far behind with 16.8. He was 11th. The Maple Leafs were the only team with 2 goalies in the top 11, and they were only one of 2 teams with a duo in the top 20. The other team being the Ducks, and both of the Ducks goalies, John Gibson and Lucas Dostal, were ranked below both of the Leafs goalies. And obviously having great goaltending can cover up a lot of your flaws. And while the Leafs have a fine defensive system. Their goalies obviously did do a lot to bail them out throughout the season last year, and that is going to be a challenge to start the year because one of them is missing. As it stands right now, Joseph Woll is away from the team with an undisclosed reason, so we have no idea when he's going to be back. We have no idea what's going on. It's not injury related, but he might miss a month. He might miss half the year. We have no idea what's going on. We have no idea when he'll be back. So Anthony Stolarz is going to have to shoulder a lot more of that workload early on. But the biggest story, obviously, is not the goaltending or the defense or most of the forwards. It all centers around one forward that is not here anymore, and that is Mitch Marner. The Maple Leafs are going to have to replace Mitch Marner's production in some capacity because he scored 102 points last year, and for as much as people want to get on him for his playoff performances, he has been one of the best forwards in the regular season for the last several years, and that is going to be a very big absence and a very big void to fill offensively. Not just offensively either. Obviously, Marner was a great defensive forward and a great penalty killer as well. Like, his absence will be felt throughout the lineup, and the Leafs are going to have to replace him by committee because obviously you're not replacing a player like that. So a lot of guys are going to have to step up. The big one, of course, being Austin Matthews, who had battled injuries for most of last year that really hampered his ability to shoot the puck, which for an elite goal scorer is never something good. He finished with 33 goals in 67 games last year, which was the lowest goal total of his entire career so far, which is kind of insane to think about. But obviously, a healthy Matthews will go a long way towards replacing some of that production. Alongside Austin Matthews, Matthew Knies, fresh off signing a big contract extension this offseason, is looking to continue his ascension as a rising star in this league. He is going to be a staple on the Matthews line all year. But alongside them, there is a question mark. Now, there are a few options to start the year. One of them is Max Domi, who is the logical solution at this point. Matthews and Domi have played together in the past when Matthews scored 69 goals. People forget it wasn't Marner playing on Matthews' line for a lot of that year. It was Max Domi. So there is chemistry there and there is a fit there, but Max Domi is hardly top-line quality at this point in time. So if he's going to play there, he's going to have to elevate his play. Another option is a player the Leafs brought in this offseason, Matias Maccelli, who is, again, that smaller playmaker kind of role, more of a perimeter player, but he is such a good passer, and he will be able to get the puck to Matthews and Knies and get them in scoring positions, so there is a logical fit there, but the Leafs have two of these kind of archetype players, so one will probably start on the top line, one will start on the third line, and the Leafs will figure it out from there. Both guys are going to get chances throughout the season. On the second line, obviously, William Nylander and John Tavares are the staples on that line. That duo has been together for the last number of years, and they will continue to do their thing. Nylander is pretty sure bet for 40 goals this year. Tavares is pretty sure bet for at least 25. I have no reservations about that duo. John Tavares is obviously getting older, but he's still effective. Alongside them, it seems like Bobby McMann is going to start on that line, which makes sense because that line was at their best last year when Bobby McMann was on it. I know Pacioretty had some good stints in the playoffs, but he's not here anymore. Bobby McMann in the regular season was the best winger on that line, so hopefully he can continue to play well and earn his role, because for as much as he's starting there, he's going to have to keep earning it day after day because the Leafs have options. So if we play under the assumption that Max Domi is going to be on the first line, the third line is going to be made up of newbies. Dakota Joshua, Nicholas Waugh, and Matias Maccelli will presumably start the year as the third line. And this line features two bets and a guy that was traded for Mitch Marner, which obviously people are going to overreact to. But Nicholas Waugh is a very stable third line center and has been in this league for a long time. Pretty sure bet for 15 to 20 goals and around 35 to 40 points. No questions asked. Very good defensively as well. Good penalty killer. He's just going to be very steady. Alongside him, though, are two bets. I mentioned Maccelli is a smaller playmaker, and he has the numbers to back it up. A little earlier in his career, in the 22-23 season, in 64 games, he had 11 goals, 38 assists for 49 points. Very good. In 23-24 and 82 games, 17 goals, 40 assists for 57 points. Two very good seasons. Well, then why did the Leafs get him for so cheap? Well, that's because last year in 55 games, 8 goals, 10 assists, 18 points. So the Leafs are making a bet that last year was just a down year that is not going to repeat itself, and that he is a lot closer to the type of player he was from 2022 to 2024, and not the player we saw last season. Dakota Joshua similarly had some success in the 23-24 season. 63 games played. He had 18 goals, 14 assists for 32 points. And in the playoffs with the Vancouver Canucks in 13 playoff games, he had 4 goals and 4 assists as well. Very solid production. But then last year, dealing with cancer, he missed a lot of training camp, and he had a year that reflected that. In 57 games played, he had just 7 goals, 7 assists, 14 points. So the Leafs, they get these two guys for relatively cheap, because they're coming off of down years, and these are the bets that the Leafs are making. It's reasonable to expect that they are capable of producing, well, outperforming last year by a decent margin. However, they are gambles, and it is possible that these don't work out. If they do work out, great. The Leafs have a third line that should be able to be productive, or at least players that can move up and down the lineup that should be able to be productive in different roles. If it doesn't work out, then the depth is going to be questionable once again, as it usually is with this Leafs team. Now, for the fourth line, the plan to start the year was to have Steven Lorentz, Scott Laughton, and rookie Easton Cowan working there. But Scott Laughton is going to be week to week with an injury to start the year, so it seems like David Kampf could presumably be the center to start the year. And Easton Cowan, it doesn't really make sense to have him in the NHL, period, but it makes even less sense to have him in the NHL if David Kampf is going to be a center, so I would not be shocked if he gets sent down. He'll get games at some point, but playing 20 minutes a night with the Marlies is going to be better for him than playing 8 minutes a night with David Kampf. The Leafs have options for the fourth line. They can use Kelly Yarncroke, they can use Nick Robertson, they can call up a guy like Jacob Quillen. They'll figure it out. It's just a couple of weeks while Scott Laughton is hurt, and I'm sure it'll be fine. Defensively, the Leafs are running back the same core that they had post-trade deadline last season, so the top pair is going to be Jake McCabe and Chris Tanev, which was one of the most effective shutdown pairs in the league last year. There are some questions around Tanev's age and his body. Will it hold up, and will he continue to be as effective? However, based on last year, very solid pair. Should expect the same level of success again. Second pair, Morgan Rielly and Brandon Carlo. Now, Morgan Rielly coming off a down year. He has dropped a couple of pounds, and he has talked about wanting to find his offensive gear again and contribute a little bit more offensively, which would be a big help because that was an area the Leafs struggled in last year. Brandon Carlo, he had some ups and downs with the Leafs. He's not great with the puck on his stick. He's fantastic with it off of his stick. He has been a stabilizing influence for Rielly, and Rielly played his best hockey with Carlo on his pair last season. So hopefully with a full training camp together, these two will be a super solid pairing as well. And the third pair will be Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Simone Benoit, the same way it was down the stretch last year, a pairing that performed very well in the playoffs. It gave the Leafs the ability to just roll 3 pairs and not really think about it. Are they the best group in the world? No, because they don't really have that top tier stud, that true top pairing defenseman. But the Leafs have 3 pairs that they don't really have to think about, and the ability to just have 3 pairs play 20 minutes each is a very nice luxury. And obviously, I talked about the goaltenders already. However, with Joseph Woll out, James Reimer has signed a PTO, and it seems likely at this point that he is going to start the year as the Leafs' backup goalie. Or if he doesn't, then it's going to be Dennis Hildeby. Whoever it is, Stolarz is going to get the run of starts, and whoever the other guy is will only have to play a couple of games, ideally. And hopefully Joseph Woll gets back as soon as possible. There is one coaching change that we do have to talk about. Lane Lambert, who ran the Leafs defense and penalty kill last season, he has moved on to be the head coach of the Seattle Kraken, and as a result, the Leafs have hired former Red Wings head coach Derek Lalonde to replace him. Now, is this going to be the biggest deal? No, but the penalty kill and defensive deployment might just look a little bit different under Lalonde. Obviously, the big storylines with the Leafs this season are how do they look without Mitch Marner on the penalty kill and the power play 5-on-5? How does Austin Matthews rebound after an injury-riddled season? Can the goaltending hold up and be as good as it was last year? But the main one that I'm looking for this season is, can the Leafs control play at a higher clip? Because they just did not do that well enough last year. So if they can improve on the style that they played last season, it would go a long way towards finding more success. As far as expectations go, it's obvious to expect some regular season regression because A, they weren't a good possession team last year, and you can argue that they overperformed. B, Mitch Marner is gone, and C, there are other teams in the Atlantic that are on the rise and that are very good. So despite the fact that Alexander Barkov is going to miss the entire year for the Florida Panthers and Matthew Tkachuk will miss half the year, the Panthers are still a good team. They're going to be in the mix for the Atlantic. The Tampa Bay Lightning are going to be in the mix for the Atlantic, as they always are. And the Ottawa Senators and Montreal Canadiens, who were 2 playoff teams last year, are going to look to try to jump into that top 3 as well. We'll see what happens. The Leafs, if everything goes well, they should have home ice in the first round of the playoffs. if everything goes poorly and maybe Matthews isn't quite the player that he was a couple of years ago when he was competing for the MVP and scoring 60 goals, it's very possible that the Leafs are a wild card team this year. They are still talented enough to the point where they should make the playoffs relatively easily without much stress. It's just a matter of, will they be more of a wildcard team, or are they good enough to still compete for home ice advantage in the first round? I don't know, but that's kind of the things to look for. Will the bets pan out? Will Matthews rebound? And will the goaltending hold up? If those things happen, the Leafs could easily win the Atlantic again, but it's going to be an open question because obviously losing Mitch Marner is not exactly a recipe for repeating a division title. Aside from that, though, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far, remember to hit that like button and subscribe with notifications turned on so that you don't miss any of Game Over Toronto's content this upcoming season. Like I said earlier in the video, we stream after every single Leafs game. We have a post-game show that goes live 5 to 10 minutes after the conclusion of each game. So make sure you have that notification bell rang so that you don't miss any of those streams. Again, my name is Zach Payne. You can find me on Twitter and Bluesky at ZachPayne41. Follow the Game Over Network on Twitter and Bluesky and Instagram as well. And we'll see you guys next time. Cheers.